life, we go through challenges, we go through trials, we go through betrayals. And then we develop a survival mechanism that tells us we want to guard ourselves from the hurt, from the pain, and from the disappointment. Something within us tells us we are not going to allow it to happen to us any other time. That, my friends, is how we begin to erect walls that stop us and hinder us from being able to connect with other people. And without knowing, we actually are able then, or we make it difficult for us to fulfill destiny, because the walls, my friends, they did not just protect us from other people, but they protected us and they stopped us from being able to pour out the best of who we were called to be. My name is Judy Mzungu. I am your Kingdom Life Coach and founder of the ReAlignment program, and your own Safarini with Judy Mzungu, where we come here every Monday to inspire, to influence, and impart life skills that will place you on the cutting edge of life. Tonight, we are having a discussion about breaking down the walls. Because, brothers and sisters, for us to be able to fulfill destiny, for us to be able to become everything that God designed for us to be, we must come to that place where we can, one, know ourselves, and then two, be able to connect with other people, so that by connecting with other people, then it becomes possible for doors to open for us. But just for a moment, I want to pause and ask you a question. Have you ever gone through something? Have you ever faced a trauma? Have you ever faced a challenge that somehow made you feel like, I don't think I want to talk to any other person. I don't think I want to connect with other person. I don't think I can trust anyone anymore. And because of that, maybe, just maybe, you stopped connecting with people. Friends, I just want to tell you something. That is something that the enemy comes to bring our way, so that by erecting those walls, in as much as we think we are protecting ourselves, it actually is the number one thing that the enemy will do to stop you from fulfilling your purpose. And so tonight, our discussion is about breaking down those walls. If you've been there, and you can understand what I'm talking about, just type, I've been there, or I am there, or I'm living in a wall, or I'm surrounded by a wall, just something so that we know that, or I know that what it is that I'm talking about is not foreign to you, my dear audience. And so I just want to acknowledge you and welcome you to this broadcast. And even as we go through it, I want us to refer to 1 Samuel chapter 2, where we find a man who was running away from something. The word of God says David left Gath and escaped to the cave of Adullam. I want to tell you that David was running away from Saul. He was running away from the challenges that he had faced, he had encountered with when he was dealing with Saul. And because of that, he went and hid in the cave of Adullam. And that's how it is for many of us, running away from pain, running away from rejection, running away from hurt, running away from disappointment. We went to the place of hiding, where we then began to erect walls to protect ourselves from further pain, from further hurt, from further disappointment. Only, brothers and sisters, our walls, unlike the cave of Adullam, are not physical. We built invisible walls. But in as much as we think they're invisible, or sometimes, yes, they're invisible to the eye, yet truly they are a hindrance, because they protect us or they hinder us from being able to connect with other people. Those are psychological walls. And yes, sometimes we build emotional walls where we do interact with other people, but there's something that tells you, don't come so close, because you know what? I really don't quite trust you. And yes, unfortunately, we do build walls to the extent that we build spiritual walls. Spiritual walls mean that we come to that place. Yes, you're a believer. Yes, you pray. Yes, you go to church. But truthfully, the place of intimacy with God to you is foreign. Not because God moved, but the situations and circumstances of life made you run away from everything, including the one place where you could find your protection. You stopped trusting in God. You stopped believing in God. Because a part of you is asking, where were you when that happened? And so, even as we think about it, even as we begin to think about walls and what they do to us, I want us to realize when we go to 1 Samuel chapter 22, verse 2, that what then happens is that all those who are in distress or in debt or discontented gathered around David. What's interesting is the fact that when we are running away from rejection, from pain, from hurt, from disappointment, it somehow just happens that we seem to attract our kind. We seem to attract men and women who are just as hurt as we are. We seem to form a club of people who have gone through similar situations. And sometimes it's comforting. But yet another time, I want us to understand that it is really a report card for what is the state of your emotion, what is the state of your soul. Who do you attract? David, King David, or at that point he was just David, was running away. And because he was running away and he went to the cave of Adullam, where he was shielding himself physically, yet he seemed to attract men who just looked like his emotional state. Brothers and sisters, if you want to know, to have a report card of your emotional state, check the people that you attract. That is a true testament for what is actually going on inside of you. I'll do a recap. I said David was running away, just like we are running away from the things that happened to us. And because we were running away from those things, we tended to erect walls. We said emotional walls, psychological walls, and yes, spiritual walls. And something interesting happens that even when we erect those walls, we seem to attract people who just look like us. Let me break down that for you. I am a kingdom life coach, and many times, because of even my title and everything that I do is biblical based, guess what? I attract believers. People who have been in church, regardless of your denomination. But for many of them, some of them having served in church even for a very long time, yet the place of intimacy with God is really foreign to them. Not that there's anything wrong with them, but because of this, the amount of pain and trauma that they have gone through, that they are unable to see God. Forget just being a father, but even being a friend, even being the lover of your soul. The other thing that I realize has happened or happens to many people, sometimes someone is so hurt and wounded, and because of that, they seem to attract other hurt and wounded people. I keep saying, your greatest testament to your state is the person you attracted. And so, I want us to realize that the place of when you erect walls, the place that you think you have erected walls so that you can protect yourself is actually a place of stagnation. It's actually a place of immobility. It's actually a place of lack of vision. Why? For as long as you're in a stronghold, the cave is never well lit. You cannot see where you need to go. So as comfortable as it looks to feel like you're hiding from people, as comfortable as it seems for you to feel like you're never going to go through pain again, I'd like you to just for a moment pause and think about the fact that actually you're stagnated. Actually, you don't have vision. Actually, you are immobile. The place of hiding, the erected walls that you have put around you have made you immobile. And that's a good conversation for us to have, because many times, even as I go through coaching, when you start explaining to people that, you know what, you need to bring down the walls, many people seem to resist because they're thinking, this is on everything, this is all I have. How can I ever risk coming out? What if what happened to me before is going to happen to me again? And so what do we do so that then by the grace of God, we are able to break down those walls? But even before we begin talking about what we do, I want us to think or understand what happens when we erect walls around us. And think about it so that you see, are you in any of these categories? One, if you have erected walls and you're single, you will seem to get into relationship after relationship after relationship. You're chasing after something. You're chasing after connection. But unfortunately, you're not quite able to grasp connection. Why? Because you're not emotionally open to be able to connect with another. So within a very short time, that relationship ends. And then again, because you're yearning for it, your heart is in the right place, only that you don't have capacity because the walls are kind of a hindrance. You will jump into another relationship. You will jump into another relationship. Check the state of your soul. If you're married, it's possible, by the way, to be married, sleep in the same bed, live in the same house, drive the same car, but not be emotionally connected. Why? Because the wounds of the past actually come to hinder us from being able to open up to anyone. Because the truth is, emotional vulnerability is risky business. And whether we like it or not, as scary as it is, as risky as it is, you actually hinder yourself from being able to enjoy marriage as God designed it to be. If in your own understanding, you think the walls are actually going to help you. Thirdly, what happens when we erect walls? You are unable even to have healthy platonic relationships. Forget the opposite sex. I'm talking about even just friends, even just people, your peers, your people, your contemporaries. Why? There's something about your body language that seems to put people off. If I mention any of these categories and you can see it in yourself, or at least you know someone, you can say, oh, I know that. I know that. I know that. Just tell me so that then I can know that what it is I'm talking about is not rocket science. Inability to connect with other people, even in platonic relationships, is a good indicator you have walls. What is the other thing about when you erect walls? You seem to suffer cycles of rejection after rejection after rejection. Why? There's something about your body language. Even when you walk into a room, there's something that is communicating to people, I don't quite trust her. Just as much as you think you don't trust people, guess what? You're passing on that same language. There's something about you that is passing on that same language, that same signal to the people that you're interacting with. And so you also end up attracting rejection. The next thing that happens, as a result of all these things happening, remember what is happening to you? Emotionally, you're getting disappointment. Emotionally, you're getting drained. And because of that, your mindset, you stop believing in yourself. And as a result of that, you lose drive for life. Remember, we are social beings, we are relational beings. So every time you're entering into situations where you cannot quite seem to fit in, within a very short period of time, you will lose enthusiasm, you will lose drive for life, you will lose passion for life. And then, what is the other thing that happens? Because you get frustrated by the repeated cycles, you end up propagating the same cycle as a result of what you went through in the past. And guess what? You will start now hurting other people through careless remarks, through scheming evil against other people, through your rudeness, whatever it is. Not that you're a bad person. The trauma of the past brought you to a place where you erected walls. And so everyone fears you, and you think that actually it's an accolade. It's not. It points to something inside of you that actually needs to be healed. If any of these categories make sense to you, just say, I know that, I know that, I know that, I know what you're talking about. So then, does it mean that if this is a situation that's it? No, there is hope. Those walls can come down. It's possible for us to heal. It's possible for us to overcome the past. It's possible for us to be able to enjoy healthy and fulfilling relationships, whether platonic, whether, at our workplaces, whether, with our spouses or even with our future spouses. It's possible for you to begin to enjoy life again. But what do we do for us then to be able to break those walls? The first thing that we need to do is that you have to be able to dare to come out. In verse 3, the word of God says, from there, David went to Mizpah. So David had to risk leaving the strongholds. David had to risk leaving the stronghold. You see, you have lived in that cave. You have lived, having walls built around you for so long that you actually think it's the norm. So even as you begin to think about this, and you can begin to then place yourself, I must hasten to add that it's important for you to trace where the problem came from and then heal. If this conversation probably doesn't make sense because you're watching this broadcast for the first time, please go and look for a broadcast that we did right here, coming out of the prison. So you have to heal. After you heal, then, you have to dare to come out. I run a program called the ReAlignment program. And in the ReAlignment program, it's a 10-week program that includes personal coaching sessions. But after the personal coaching sessions, we are keen to ask, okay, where were you when you came in and where are you now? And then go out. Go back and continue with life. Why? It does not make sense for us to keep you lingering around me, because I don't have the answers. I have to allow you to take your crutches and begin to walk. There's a time my sister fractured her foot. And so when we asked the doctor, when will we know that she is okay? The doctor said something interesting. He said that when you are okay, you will forget the crutch and find that you have walked without it. So yes, in 10 weeks, we might not be sure, or you might not be fully healed, but yet we have to give you the crutch and then show you how to walk. Then allow you to continue walking so that by the grace of God, you will forget that crutch. And before long, you discover you are healed and you are walking on your own. That, by the way, is God's desire, that you would not depend on man, that you would not depend on me, but that you would learn to depend on God. You have to dare to come out. Then the second thing that you realize is that David went to Mizpah. Mizpah means watchtower. The Lord's watchtower. Now you have to understand that many times, because you are used to protecting yourself, you actually think that you have what it takes to protect yourself. I remember years ago, I had boarded a matatu, and then unfortunately were kidnapped in that matatu. So when the next time, matatu, by the way, for those who are not from Kenya, is a public transport. It's a van that's generally public transport. So what then happened is that the next day, of course, they stole everything. And then now the next day life had to go on and we had to go to work. When I boarded the public transport, when I boarded the vehicle again the next day, what did I do? I got into the vehicle and I peered. Then I alighted. Something within me told me that all those people, some people there were looking suspicious. Do I know how kidnappers look? No. Yet that is how we behave. Because you are hurt, you want to treat everyone as if you have sensors to realize how bad people look. You know what? At the end of the day, as naive as sometimes it might look, we have to learn to trust in the Lord. David went to Mizpah. Then, the next thing that you realize in verse 4 is that it says, so he left his parents to the king of Mizpah, and they stayed with the king of Mizpah as long as David was in the stronghold. He left, but then he went back again. You know, these days on social media, have you ever seen there's a lot of conversation about toxic people, about narcissistic people, and they're saying, you know what, my spouse was narcissistic, everyone is narcissistic, everyone is toxic according to everyone, because we seem to have a standard for. But you know, I have news for you. We live in a fallen world. Yes, there's a place, by the way, for us to be able to institute time boundaries so that the other people learn to treat us well. There is a place for us to be able to institute geographical boundaries, for us to say, you know what, for this period, let's stay away from one another, so we learn to respect one another. But I put it to you that you cannot stay away from people forever. But something happens when you know yourself. Something happens when you know your identity. You will know how to set healthy boundaries when you're dealing with these people. David went back to the stronghold. Then I want you to realize that David, as you continue, he kept on fighting the Philistines. In fact, there's a place where he was told by the prophet, do not stay in the stronghold. Meaning that there is a time limit to which you should stay in the stronghold. The problem is, many of us stay in the stronghold forever. And the problem with staying in the stronghold forever is that you will never fulfill purpose. So David kept leaving the stronghold and going to fight the Philistines. What does that mean? That he kept on going to fulfill his assignment. If you can have courage to leave the stronghold, then you will have capacity to fight and fulfill your assignment. What's the next thing that you realize? Is that David was actually able to raise the men around him, the men who are in debt, discontented, and distressed. He was able to lead them. What does that mean? Is that when you are healed, when you know yourself, when you have capacity enough to bring down your walls, you then do develop capacity to know how to rise above the situation and circumstances around you. And that is how then we become the salt and the light, meaning that we enter into rooms, we enter into spaces and change the atmosphere because of what we carry. It only happens because we have healed. It happens because we ourselves have taken the journey. And because we have taken the journey, now we can carry other people and take them to that place where we have been. That, by the way, is the only way we will become kingdom influencers. And so, even as I wind up, what does this whole thing mean? It means that for you to be able to break down the walls, you have to have capacity to change your physical environment. David left and he went to Mizpah. He left the stronghold. You know what? When you mean about changing the physical environment, it means you have to be able to change what you see, what you hear, what you touch, what you feel, what you smell. What kind of environment do you put yourself through? Who speaks to you? What did they speak to you about? The second thing is that you have to develop intimacy with God. David went to Mizpah, the place of the watchtower, because you must realize that you don't have capacity to protect yourself. Only God can. Thirdly, you must come to that place where then you develop an ability to interact with people, sometimes different from you. I'm talking about emotional prosperity. Then you also must have capacity to have a mindset that is then creative. What did David have? He was able to have creative strategy to know how it is that he was going to fight with the Philistines. That can only happen because you have healed, because you have changed your environment, and because something is beginning to change within you. And finally, you must come to the place of relational prosperity. Why? Because when you have relational prosperity, then you will have capacity for leadership, what they call in the world emotional intelligence. As a matter of fact, you cannot have emotional intelligence if you are not healed, if you don't know yourself, if you don't have intimacy with God, and if you don't have capacity to trust yourself and to trust others. And so I believe that tonight, by the grace of God, you are empowered to begin to break down those walls. Brothers and sisters, it is only in breaking down those walls that then we will be able to connect with others. Then doors will begin to open for us so that we can begin to then achieve the highest potential that God has deposited in us. Because guess what? That which you need is in the hands of another person. You can only receive, doors can only be opened for you if people can trust you. They can only trust you if you in return are able to trust them. If this conversation has been impactful to you, kindly do me a favor, share it in your walls, share it in your groups, share it wide. Let's go out there and impact people to the glory and to the honor of his name. My name again is Judy Mzungu Jabali. This is what we come to do every Monday from 8:30 to 9 o'clock. Before I go, I just want to say thank you so much, Maggie Kangede. Thank you, Constance. Thank you, Sandy. Thank you, Shafin. Thank you, Ronald Moigacho. I know we've not been able to acknowledge everyone who is here on the broadcast tonight, and even those who are going to watch on the replay. Thank you so much. Let's do this again next Monday, 8:30 to 9 o'clock. Until next week, Safari.